day, everyone. Welcome to Wings of Faith Ministries and today's morning coffee and a thought. Back in 1976, a lawyer, John Dean, wrote an autobiography which was entitled Blind Ambition. The book was about John Dean's rise to power in both political and judicial circles in Washington. At just 30 years old, he became the counsel to the President of the United States at the time, Richard Nixon. But the story goes on to tell where that blind ambition led John Dean, down a road of corruption and a crisis of his own conscience. Today I want to talk about another type of ambition, a godly ambition, and we'll get to that thought in just a moment. First of all, I want to remind you that Morning Coffee and a Thought can be seen every Friday on our YouTube channel beginning at 1 o'clock and every Sunday morning on our Facebook page between the hours of 8 and 9 in the morning. Also, we want to remind you that if you have a prayer request, if you want information or you want to make a donation to Wings of Faith Ministries, you can do all of these things on our website, wingsoffaithministries.ca. And now back to our thought. We go back to 870 BCE in the story of Israel, and we have a prophet named Elijah. He had had a meeting with God at Mount Horeb, where God instructed him where to go in his life forward. And he shows up at a farm of Shaphat. And it's at this farm that he sees a young man plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. The young man's name was Elisha. Elijah came up to him, took off his cloak that he was wearing, and put it on the young man. The young man knew exactly what this action signified, that the prophet Elijah was calling him to be his apprentice. He told the prophet, "Just give me a bit and I'll join you." And so, to make a statement to those around him, he slaughtered the 12 yoke of oxen. He burned all the utensils he was using to plow the field. And then in that fire, he cooked the meat for all the people on the farm. It was a statement saying that he was leaving that life, the life of a farmer, behind to take on a new life as a prophet's apprentice. It was quite a statement and quite an action by a young man. He followed Elijah for over 10 years, being his apprentice, watching his master both prophesy and do works of miracles. But then we read that the day had come when he sensed that his master was going to die. The story starts in Gilgal, where there was a prophetic school. There in Gilgal, after ministering to the prophets, Elijah said to Elisha, "Why don't you stay here and I'm going to head on to Bethel?" But Elisha said, "No, I'm not staying here. I'm going to join you." The prophets that were at Gilgal said to the young man, Elisha, "You know your master's going to die today and be taken to heaven." Elisha said, "I know." And on they went to Bethel. There again, Elijah ministered to the prophets, the prophetic school that was at Bethel. And once again, he said to his protege, "You stay here. I'm going to go on to Jericho." Elisha says, "No, I'm coming with you." The prophets there at Bethel said to the young man, "You know your master's going to be taken from you today." Elisha says, "Yeah, I know it, but be quiet about it." And so on they went and journeyed to Jericho. After finishing and ministering to the prophets at Jericho, Elijah said to Elisha, I'm heading for the Jordan River. Why don't you just stay here with the prophets? Elisha said, no way. I'm coming with you. And then once again, the prophets at Jericho said to the young man, you know your master is going to be taken today. He says, I know it. As they got to the Jordan River, Elijah took off that cloak that he had once clothed Elisha with, and he struck the water. The scriptures say the waters divided, and the two prophets went across the Jordan River. They got to the other side, and here's where the story reaches its climax. Elijah looks at his young protege and says, I'm going to be taken away today. What can I do for you? He knew why the young prophet had followed him. And here's where we get godly ambition as opposed to blind ambition. The young man says to him, I want a double portion of the Spirit you have. You see, he had watched his master for 10 years in the story of Israel's history. He had seen the miracles, heard the prophecies. And he, being a young man, thought, if I'm going to fill the shoes of my master, I'm going to at least need a double portion of what my master has. I call that noble ambition. And I think Elijah felt the same way. He said to the young man, what you've asked me for is very, very difficult. But if you see me taken up away from you, you will know that God has granted your wish. It was no sooner out of his mouth than it says the chariots of heaven came, picked up his master, and carried Elijah back up to heaven. When that happened, that cloak fell from Elijah and landed on the ground. The young man knew right then that was a sign. He had seen his master go, and there was the cloak on the ground. The scriptures say he picked it up, struck the river, and it divided for him. The prophets who were watching all this on the other side of the Jordan said to themselves, the spirit of Elijah has now come on Elisha, the prophet. You see, Elisha had what I call noble, godly ambition. He showed it from an early age when called by the prophet, making a sign, a clear sign in front of his family and friends that I'm leaving this life behind to join the prophet Elijah. He meticulously studied the life of his master. And then at the very end, he says to him, and this is ambitious, I want a double portion of what you've got. But God honored that because of the man's life, his desire, his ambition to be a good prophet. In the New Testament, Jesus talks about this type of godly ambition. He says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and then all the rest will be added unto you. Godly ambition is seeking God's will for our life, seeking God's power to work within us. And that's what the young man Elisha had, that godly, noble ambition to do God's will and to fulfill God's purpose in his life. But to do that required two things. Number one, to leave his life behind, which Jesus talked about to the disciples. If you're going to follow me, you're going to have to leave this life to take on life in the kingdom of God. And secondly, to desire God's best. Lord, I want a double portion of what this man had. That's the thought I want to leave with you today. Noble, godly ambition. To leave the life of the world behind and to desire God's best purpose for your life. Have a good day, enjoy your coffee, and we'll see you next week.